Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce Anthony Myers, Conservation Coordinator for CalWater. Basically, same drill. We want you to hear the ag and the urban side of efforts that have been done to date and where things are going. I will also say that, as I noted, we're doing videography, and we've had the guest speakers, and at the last session, we had Michael Kahn, who some of you may know, who's Ag Extension, and he did, he basically picked up on Norm's presentation and did an expanded presentation on even more detail about various technologies that are being pursued. And then tomorrow, we have Tia Fleming, and she is the co-executive director of an organization called California Water Efficiency Partnership, or CalWEP, and they are spearheading or really acting as the frontline intermediary between jurisdictions that are having to deal on an urban side and organizations dealing on an urban side on the recent and the upcoming new Water Conservation as a Way of Life regs. And Tia, so back in Salinas in a more urban context, Tia is going to be our guest speaker, and she's going to pick up basically where tomorrow it'll be Margaret Golden, who's a colleague of Anthony's. She'll pick up there. So be looking on the website if you weren't able to attend all of these, because all of these guest speaker presentations will be available for you to watch, including, like I said, the expanded information from Michael Kahn, the work from Margaret and Anthony, and then also the presentation from Tia tomorrow on the urban side. So with that, just make a note of that, and do keep going back to the Salinas Valley GSA website for updated videos from all this. So with that, Anthony.
Thank you, David. Good morning, everybody. Firstly, I want to thank everybody for coming out. If you're here this morning, that means that you care about what us water professionals are doing to mitigate as kind of with the topic of today, the uncertainty of our water supply here in the state of California. Hopefully today I'll shed a little bit of light on what we've been doing on the urban water side, kind of give you a glimpse into the past of what we've looked at and done over the last 20 years, what we're currently doing, and also kind of what we're looking at coming down the horizon as far as new technology and things like that. We'll take a quick look at the legislative history. I won't get into the weeds too much with it. That's one easy way to get people to fall asleep at 10 o'clock in the morning, so we'll just kind of give a brief granular overview of it. And then we'll look at what we've been doing as far as in water conservation, outdoor versus indoor, and then what we deem to be the most impactful programs in our experience at having tried all kinds of different things. So a quick look at the legislative history. In 93, they rolled out first what we refer to as the MWELA ordinance. It's a model water efficient landscape ordinance. Basically what this did was this ordinance put a requirement on all new urban developments and redoing of any kind of landscapes to fit inside a certain parameter of how those landscapes are designed and also how they're irrigated so that it meets water efficiency standards. Fast forward a little bit further into 2009, the Water Conservation Act of 2009 mandated that the state achieve a 20% reduction in all urban per capita water use by the year 2020. This was a big hurdle because prior to that, there were not really big water conservation programs in place, and so it put a really big constraint on us urban water side people to figure out how we were going to meet those 20% reduction goals. What that turned into was us having to create water conservation programs and figuring out how we were going to fund them, figuring out which ones were going to work and which ones customers were going to actually adopt and make part of their way of life. On the urban side, it also caused us to have to develop urban water management plans so we could figure out how we were going to meet those parameters also. And in addition to that, we had to come up with water shortage contingency plans that we would have to write and present to the state, so that we had a plan in place for every time that we engaged into a drought, what were we going to do to mitigate those droughts? Because we know one thing we can count on in the state of California is that we don't know from one year to the next what kind of climate we're going to have or how much water we're going to have. So having a contingency plan in place really kind of helps us be ready for that. And then looking more forward into right now, there's current legislation in place. It's still in a draft stage, if you will. A little discombobulated, if you will, also, but it's in the works. The topic of it is making water conservation a way of life in the state of California. Instead of, in the past, us having a reactive approach to how we meet conservation goals, It's more of a proactive, how are we going to make water conservation practices stuff that we do on a day-to-day basis. And then we'll touch a little bit on AB 1572. So the upcoming framework, it's going to be an interesting hurdle, at least for us on the urban side, because the state's now requiring that we create standards for all different types of water users, and we identify those water users and kind of put them in a box, if you will. So there's going to have to be a standard for indoor residential water use, a standard for outdoor water use, a standard for CII, which is commercial, industrial, and institutional landscapes, and also a standard on how we mitigate water losses, because there are a significant amount of water losses that occur just from regular day-to-day practices that occur on the urban water side. So AB 1572, non-functional turf ban. Has anybody heard anything about this non-functional turf ban? It's going to be interesting. This was signed into law late last year. Basically, what this is going to do is it's going to be a phased rollout. The state is now saying that for certain types of properties, if they have what's deemed to be non-functional turf, so that's large areas of grass that aren't used for functional recreational purposes, sports, athletics, things like that. Here in about 6 more years, you're not going to be able to water them, which in essence means that you're going to have to convert those areas of turf over to drought-tolerant landscaping. It's going to roll out starting in 2027. It's going to first affect local government properties. So ultimately, the reason why they did this is those municipalities are going to have to be ultimately the ones enforcing this legislature when it goes into effect. So we got to lead by example. So, public areas that have large sections of turf that are deemed to be non-functional, those are going to have to go first. After that, it's going to affect commercial properties with large areas of turf. And then after that, it's going to be HOAs that have common areas of shared grass. So it's a good time right now if people have those types of properties to kind of start looking into conservation programs and rebates that are available for helping assist with the cost of converting those turf areas, because right now there's money for it. But I would imagine here in about 6-7 years when it becomes ordinance, they probably won't be quite as funded as they are right now. So indoor versus outdoor. So indoor, we put a lot of emphasis on indoor programs. They are very impactful. One thing inside that we always take a look at first is toilets, because they do tend to account to, in essence, around 27% of indoor water use, which is why you will see most water agencies, water retailers, they will almost always have some kind of a toilet buyback program or a toilet rebate program in place. Indoor, they are the biggest water consuming appliance that occurs inside the house. But if we take a look at outdoor, fun fact is that as much as 60% of all domestic water use is applied towards outdoors, so landscape water use. On the urban water side, that's a significant amount. The biggest portion of that is actually attributed to watering grass and keeping grass green. So that's why you'll see a lot of our conservation programs and rebate programs are mostly funded towards outdoor use, because it's the most impactful. That's where we see the biggest water reduction results. So we fund those programs a lot. So turf buyback programs, about 10, 15 years ago, you saw a lot of these. That was the terminology, was a turf buyback program. They had pros and cons. There were definitely measurable water use reductions, because what are we doing? We're taking out grass and we're not watering it anymore. The problem with that is, in my opinion, they were somewhat flawed in their design, because we were incentivizing people to take out grass, but there wasn't a lot of thought involved into what was going to go back in that grass's place. So what we ended up with was a lot of landscapes that were kind of scorched earth looking, if you will. The term xeriscape got kind of popular around that time. So people thought, oh, I have to take my grass out. Now what am I going to do? Oh, I have to put cactuses back. My front yard now has to look like I live in the middle of Palm Desert. So we ended up with a lot of those types of landscapes, or no landscapes whatsoever. Another factor of that was these were fairly low on how they were funded. So as far as the incentive side of it, you would typically see maybe 50 cents a square foot, upwards to maybe $1 a square foot was the rebate incentive to take out turf. So not a lot of people engaged in these programs. And again, because there was no forethought into how those landscapes were going to be turned into, there was no specific environmental or ecological benefits to them. So fast forward to Today, lawn conservation programs have a whole new face. And the way that we kind of develop these programs now to make them more appealing to people is we fund them a lot more. So now you see rebates somewhere in the ballpark of 3. Even during this last drought, I think we had some programs run up to $5 a square foot that we were incentivizing people to take turf out. And instead of just asking them to rip grass out, we're also providing a plethora of extra additional support and education. So now we have plant lists of thousands and thousands of plants that people can pick from. We have plant palettes and landscape designs that they can look at and just kind of help them create a new design for what their yard's going to look like once that grass comes out. The cool thing is that all those plants on those lists, they're all approved and they're all native plants to the state of California. So the reason behind that is you take the grass out, you put these beautiful plants in because they're native to our current climate. Once they get developed, you don't have to water them. You may have to give them a drink of water every once in a while, but they're basically designed because they're native. They thrive all on their own. Another thing that we do a lot on the urban side is it's a little more of a hands-on type of a program, but these are landscape tune-up programs. So a lot of people have existing landscape and irrigation in their home. You may have lived in a house for 35 years. You might have just bought it, but chances are 99.9% of those are not running at their most efficient capacity. So how do we mitigate that? We could tell people, hey, go outside, turn on your sprinklers, see if you could find something wrong. Most people don't know what they're looking at outside in their yard. So we develop programs now to where we will actually go to the home. So with this particular program, somebody can sign up for it. We partner with a landscape contractor that has a statewide reach. Once they sign up for the program, we'll actually send that landscape contractor to that home or business. And now we're hands-on, we're there. We're going to take a thorough look, and that contractor is going to do a very thorough evaluation of the existing irrigation system while they're there. They're going to look for all kinds of stuff, outdated nozzles, things that could be converted to drip, see what their timer looks like. Do they have a smart irrigation controller? They're going to make this big list of recommendations on how to bring that irrigation system up to its most efficient capacity. But instead of giving that list to the customer as a honeydew list, they actually give the list to us, and we look at it. And as long as it's within the parameters of the program itself, we actually will now send the landscape contractor back to that home or back to that business, and they perform all of those irrigation upgrades and repairs. They actually do all the work. They send us the bill, and we pick up the tab. So it's a really good way of implementing these programs that takes it out of the lap of the customer, and it just lets us get those things done so we meet those water efficiency requirements in each home and each business. Last but not least, definitely a really cool thing, and you can see these in pretty much, I would say almost every retailer now has these conservation kits. You can sign up for them. They just send this box to you for free. It's full of all kinds of really cool conservation goodies. Most people can install these themselves with minimal tools. My mom actually ordered 2 of them not too long ago, and she said she put them all in without any tools, so go Mom. But they come with shower heads and a self-shut-off hose nozzle and aerators. The cool thing with these is that the way they're designed, they don't really feel like they're reducing like water. They actually have really good pressure, so you don't feel like you're sacrificing quality as far as taking a good shower. Again, these are free. You can just call the office, or you can go on the websites and you can sign up for these, and we'll actually send them out for free. So here's just kind of an overview of what we consider to be a robust conservation program that's effective. All kinds of rebates for indoor and outdoor. You got your standard things like rebates on clothes washers, toilets, high-efficient nozzles. As I mentioned, the smart irrigation controller. By show of hands, does anybody here have a smart irrigation controller? Does anybody not know what they are? Everybody does? Okay. Basically, what it does is it replaces your regular irrigation timer, and it communicates through Wi-Fi, and it collects local weatherized telemetry data. So it knows when it's going to rain based off the forecast, and it knows not to turn on your irrigation system and water 24 hours before, on the day of, or 24 hours after it rains. So it really takes that off your plate as far as having to remember to turn it off. On the commercial side of it, this is a very robust, what I consider a robust water conservation program. You'll see it's all the similar type of things, but we have things for more like your commercial type toilets, urinals, larger scale irrigation equipment and nozzles. But the one thing I want to point out that you're starting to see pop up more up and down the state is customized incentive programs. These are really cool because what they do is it allows us to, if we can identify a unique or a boutique way of conserving water that maybe doesn't fit right in the cookie cut parameters of one of our existing programs, we can now identify and we can custom tailor a rebate around that. So let's say, for instance, a factory comes to us and they say, hey, we just found this really cool piece of equipment that we can use for our cooling towers. It's going to save us 15 million gallons of water a year. Well, that's not one of our programs per se, but we can actually look at that and we can use, there's a way we can formulate what the water savings and the cost savings will be for that. And we can actually help the customer or help that business purchase that piece of equipment and make it more feasible for them. So it's really cool. It lets us color outside the lines a little bit, if you will. Just to give you an idea why we put so much emphasis on outdoor water conservation programs. This is, so if you look at the bottom number, 94.5 million gallons, that's our assessment of how much water is estimated will be saved from just water conservation program adaptation from last year, from 2023 alone, over its lifetime. So that's a big number. But if you take a look at the top number, 759.2 million gallons, that's what we estimate will be saved from 2023 program engagement for irrigation and outdoor landscape program adoption. So that's a significant number, and that's just from adoption from 2023. So you can see why we kind of put a lot of emphasis on funding outdoor programs, because that's where we get the most bang for our buck. So do we have anybody from fire departments, any firefighters, or anybody that knows any firefighters here in the room? Okay, so you're probably a little familiar with this. One of the things that's very important that we do as a water agency is we look at things that maybe we haven't looked at before. In many cases, that involves exploring new technology that might be available to save water that hasn't really been adopted yet. So one thing we've been looking at a lot more recently are things that we chalk up typically as what we call water losses or unmetered, unbilled usage. Firefighters in all districts up and down the state, they use a lot of water, and you'd be very surprised that not the largest percentage of that is actually attributed to fighting fire per se. It goes into training, and it goes into engine recertification. So every fire department is required to do so much flow of water for the firefighters, firstly, to make sure that they keep their certification active. So they have to flow so many hundreds of thousands of gallons of water per person to maintain their certification. They may be doing an academy, so this happens multiple times a year. Also to keep those trucks and engines recertified and keep them on the road so that they can respond to emergencies, all those have to flow so many gallons of water also. So on a typical training day, it kind of looks something like what you see here in the picture. You'll see a bunch of firefighters. They're all flowing hoses. That's all being gauged and tracked. They have to meet such requirements as far as how much water is going. But usually they're shooting it at a fake building or a car, abandoned car. All that water ends up going on the ground. So how do we rectify that? How do we save all that water? Well, there's some cool new tech that we've been utilizing recently called DRAFTS units. DRAFTS unit stands for Direct Recirculation Apparatus Firefighter Training and Sustainability Unit. I think that's probably one of the longest acronyms in the water conservation industry. What does it do? Despite its really cool appearance, no, you cannot order street tacos out of it. But it does do something really cool. So basically, this becomes the new target for all of those training exercises and all that engine recertification. So this hooks up to an engine truck and a pump, and it's creating a perpetual loop. The bottom of this fills up with only 2,000 gallons of water. And so now those firefighters are shooting water into a baffle in the back of the unit, and they can also shoot water into the top of it from a ladder truck. I'll give you this kind of shows you what it looks like while it's set up and being ran. But it's really cool. So now instead of using 50,000 gallons of water during a single training circuit, we're only using that same 2,000 gallons of water, and it's just going in a perpetual loop. And because the way these have heat sinks and stuff inside of them, they actually cool the water down while it's in use. So these can be ran for several hours end on end, and they can just keep meeting all those cycles and repetitions. And so everybody gets their certification that they need, but we're only using that 2,000 gallons of water instead of 50,000. So it's really cool technology. There's a lot of other really cool technology out there that we're looking into as well. So just to kind of give you an idea, it's important that us as on the urban water side, we kind of look at what's out there, allow ourselves to think outside the box a little bit and adopt new tech when it comes available. That's pretty much it for me. I'm happy to take any questions.
I've got a couple that are right here. I think they're coming in. Okay, great. Does CalWater use AMI?
Ooh, coming with the loaded gun. Yes, it's to answer your question, yes, we do use AMI. It's not where it's going to be. It's a slow rollout, kind of like what he mentioned on the ag side. The biggest part of it, within the next 10 years, we're all going to be on AMI. It's pretty safe to say that. From on the private urban water side, for us, we have a rate case that occurs every 3 years, and our GAC it's got a lot of costs built into it. The biggest thing for us is to make sure that we minimally impact our ratepayers as much as possible. So AMI is, like you said, it's a very expensive rollout. What we're doing right now is we're putting into our GAC's plans so that we can incorporate those and roll those out in a slow but still timely manner to where it's not going to greatly impact water rates to our customers up and down the state. We have 3 pilot programs currently going on where we're installing AMI, and we're currently looking at how we're going to roll AMI out for the rest of the state. But yeah, probably within the next 10 years, everybody's going to have AMI meters on residential and commercial.
From 1996 to current, Monterey County Ag reduced its consumptive use by over 100,000 acre-feet. How much actual reduction in consumptive water use of water has been achieved by the cities in the Salinas Valley? And again, specifically, not conservation, how much actual reduction?
Well, okay, so it varies from, we look at everything district by district because we have multiple districts up and down the state. So we have an entire department that's dedicated to looking at those water use reductions and how we report them. In the Salinas area, once we had the last drought, we were required to do those reporting on a monthly basis. So we were looking at our production versus our demand reductions versus our actual metered output. So the state said we needed to meet a 20% reduction in comparison to 2020 during this last drought. In almost all cases, we met that 20% reduction. We had a few districts that were a little slow that needed a little kicking to get with the program. As far as what that relates to in acre feet, I'd have to get back to you on it because it's like I said, it's a district by district amount. But we did meet those 20% reductions in almost all of our districts throughout the last 4 or 5 years actually now.
And I can't get the answer now, but I can pose this question via email tonight to Tia Fleming from CalWater, who I spoke about, is going to be speaking tomorrow in Salinas. She's got really significant databases. I mean, I've been sat with her. She's been able to pull up information almost real time about various fairly detailed geographic information. Does the GSA, does the Salinas Valley Basin GSA provide any funding grants for municipalities for recycled, reclaimed water projects or grant application assistance? Brett?
We do not. We are a planning agency, but that's something that in the future, as we lean into this demand management, is that something that our users would like us to do, but currently no.
Boy, I hope the answer to this question is no. Has the proliferation of craft breweries intensified water use in urban areas?
Wow. I would say yes, we have hotspots. We definitely have hotspots. Just to use an example up north in Chico, we have the Sierra Nevada Brewing Company. They've expanded their operations significantly. Some of those expansions have, one of the expansions actually involved them installing their own private well, which was an interesting circumstance. They thought it was going to help with production significantly. It did not. So we actually, through their expansion, we've seen a massive uptick in just water consumption there for production. And not just production because there are bottling facilities. The other leg of that is the all the washing and the preparatory things and that go into it. So it's not just the water used for actually the beer, its production itself. It's all the other things that go along with it. So yeah, the few that I've taken a hard look at, yes, massive ramp up as far as beer. But who doesn't love beer? So we're happy to make those sacrifices.
In Scotts Valley, where I came from, we have both. We have local water district, but city is responsible for public works or the wastewater. And there is a large microbrewery that came there. It posed issue to the wastewater side of it. And because we also have recycled water, it posed an issue for the water district because there were times when we could not get recycled water because the plant was upset because of the biology, organics that was introduced to the system. And that's another interesting one. How do all of those water conservation measures that reduce the water use impact the wastewater side and impact the availability of the recycled water? Because it's not only the quantity of that, but the quality is very different. The solids is much higher than it used to be, and often the wastewater side, their treatment plants are 30 years old, and they are not equipped to actually treat that water. So we are all connected in this water world.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, I mean, indirect or somewhat related to that, for something else for you to kind of track or keep an eye on is, and I'm gonna forget I can't remember the specific acronym. I'll look it up and I'll report back. But there's a group that started last year by DWR. The acronym is DRIP, okay, and it's the DRIP Collaborative. I wrote the white paper about it that actually then created this group, and the premise of it was getting the sort of the unusual suspects. When we talk about drought response and these type of contingencies in water management, there needs to be a bit of an awareness and sensitivity to the water providers of the world and the water districts of the world, because they're the parties that are looked to solve the problem, and they're the ones that are being told and mandated, use less of the product that you're selling. And there's no other business that exists like that. But what's out of that equation is the breweries, the car wash industry, the automobile sales industry that washes cars on a daily basis all the time, the Coca-Cola plants, and so they're trying to create and expand a conversation on drought contingency and drought response to these more unusual suspects who aren't commonly thought of, but have a very significant role in the economic nature of things when they can't have water either. So you may want to look into that. It's called the DRIP program, and it's under DWR's website. Drought Resilience Interagency and Partners Collaborative. See, I should know that, but I didn't name it that when I wrote the white paper. But anyway. All right. How do you feel? Next question. How do you fund your incentive programs?
So beer sales, definitely. So our incentive programs they're district oriented. Each one of our districts up and down the state has its own individual general rate case. So it's based off of the number of service connections, the number of customers, per capita water use. And so we present that every 3 years to the CPUC as far as what we request that we're allowed to use out of our rate case to spend on water conservation programs. A small district will have a small budget. A large district will have a large budget. So they vary from district to district. And then we also look at data that we capture and research to see program activity, engagement, things like that. So every 3 years, we look and say, okay, this particular district has really jumped on board. Maybe we can keep the same budget for conservation programs. This one's kind of a little slow moving, so maybe we ask the CPUC if they could help us fund it a little bit more so we could spend more money towards irrigation, public speaking, extra program circulation, things like that. So it does vary from district to district, but it's based on the individual district's rate case.
Water purveyors are very, very interesting business. They pay their customers to use less of their product. Think about it, business people.
That is quite the conundrum, isn't it?
All right, last question. I will let you interpret exactly how you want to go with this. Desalination for urban water supply in Salinas Valley, question mark. Talk amongst yourselves.
I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. Great weather we're having. No, so I will say this. If you'd asked me that question 4 years ago, it would have been completely off the table. Obviously, the age-old perspective is desal is extremely expensive. It's not cost efficient. But as we look forward into the new upcoming framework and what the state's requirements are, and also some of the new technology with desal that's kind of coming, it's not the same desal it used to be. I think those conversations are more on the table than they were 10 years ago. So yeah, as a company, we personally right now don't have any desal projects, but I wouldn't say that I would be surprised if we saw those more on the table over the next 5 to 10 years.
I just 2 days ago, I was at the Association of California Water Agencies conference, spring conference, and I watched a presentation by Tim Quinn, who some of you, if you're in the water business, you may know, and he was presenting a brand new technology, which is a desal program that is based upon in-ocean pods. And there are these large pods that draw water directly in and then pipe it in. It was a little unclear about how they deal with the brine stream, but if you've oh, okay, yeah, and it's an interesting feature because if any of you know desal plants, they in addition to the energy demands, they have very significant footprints geographically. Is CalWater Service looking to expand in Monterey County?
That would be a question for our operations manager, Patrick. Nope. We're good where we're at.
Where are you?
We're here in King City. Yeah, I hope I get this right. We service about, 14,000 people here in King City? 16,000? And about 2,600 service connections? Okay, yeah.
And then also Salinas?
And also Salinas, correct. Yep, correct. We get around.
Maybe the peninsula.
Hey, you never know.
Any other questions? All right, well, we're going to send you to a break. Please avail yourself of the posters that we have. Please avail yourself of the food. We hope